Hey everybody, it's me, Steve SCHNEE, the CD Junkie. On this episode of CD Junkie, I am revisiting a band that I talked about last year, but they have a brand new album out and I want to talk about them again. So this episode is focused on the VAPORS. Now, I like to start these episodes out by telling you how I got into the band, and that was basically because I went down to my local record store. I had a little money in my pocket, enough to buy one album, and I always like to go to the miscellaneous sections and go through. Of course, after about an hour or two, I had a couple albums under my arm, but I came across this album called Nuclear Days. This is 1980. Nuclear Days by a band called the VAPORS. Now, at that point, Turning Japanese was not being played on the radio here in the U.S., at least not that I had heard. And I looked at the album and I thought, oh, it's a band with "the" in front of it, which was always a key to me to zoom in and pay attention to that. So the VAPORS and Nuclear Days. And I turned around, and it was produced by Vic Coppersmith Heaven. Now, Vic Coppersmith Heaven was the producer of one of my favorite bands at that time, and of all time, The Jam. So I put whatever I had in my hand, I put it away, and I bought Nuclear Days by the VAPORS. Of course, it was the American version, which, there were a couple differences in the UK version, but I didn't know about that at the time. It didn't matter. All I knew is that I had this album by this band called the VAPORS. It looked interesting. It looked cool. I put the needle down, and boom, 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 I was blown away. Just great songwriting. Just one great song after another. Bam, 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 all the way through the album. I was like just sort of stunned because it was so great. Every single thing in every song was great, from the intro to the chorus to the verses to the bridge to the middle eights. Just everything was just melodic, and it was punchy too. It had that new wave mod edge to it, and it was fun, and it was exciting. It was action packed. It was full of great songs. And of course, this is the album with Turning Japanese, but it's also got News at 10, which is one of my favorites. It's got Trains. It's got Waiting for the Weekend. So many great songs. Letter from Hero. And of course, this CD version that came out on Captain Mod has a bunch of bonus tracks. This basically brings together everything from this period. Now, they had a single that came out before the album called Prisoners, which is great. It wasn't on the UK version, but they put it on the American version. They took off a couple songs, mixed things around. And the CD, by the way, has the actual British track listing, which had two songs that were not on the American album, Cold War and America. This basically has everything that was on the US and the UK versions. This came out in 1980. It was fantastic. It was wonderful, and still a great, powerful, wonderful record that sounds great today. They followed it up with a sort of concept album called Magnets. Now, this cover was done by the guy who eventually went on to do Where's Waldo? And rumor has it Waldo was in there somewhere, but I have no idea, and I haven't spent the time looking. But I can tell you that this was a very different album, just as wonderful. But it was produced by a different guy, David Tickle, who had produced like Split Ends at the time. And the album was more spacious, more atmospheric, but the songs were still fantastic. The VAPORS went in different directions. Spiders, which was the first single off the album, was very different from anything that they had put out before, but it was still absolutely wonderful. Now, the single version is shorter than the album version, so when I put the album version on, I was like, wow, that's amazing. But that single also had a B-side called Galleries for Guns, which they've added to this CD. This is, again, Captain Mod, just filled with great tracks. Jimmy Jones was a KROQ hit. Isolated Case is great, which was written by Steve Smith and Edward Bazalgette. Now, guitar player Edward Bazalgette, for years I thought it was Edward Bazalgette, because I thought, oh, that sounds like a cool name, like Bazalgette, right? So every time I saw the Getty Museum, I would think of Ed Bazalgette. And then I only found out like 2 years ago, or maybe even a year and a half ago, that it's actually Bazalgette. And I was kind of disappointed, but then I thought, oh, Bazalgette Propulsion Labs. So I can still use that somewhere. But anyway, this came out in 1981, Magnets. Wonderful album filled with great tunes. It's a little darker. It's not this punchy in-your-face sound, but it's still just full of great pop melodies. Dave Fenton, just a fabulous songwriter. On both these albums, he proves it. And like I said, Ed Bazalgette and Steve Smith wrote Isolated Case off of this album, and that bode well for their future as songwriters as well. But then, boom, VAPORS broke up. They tried to record one more single after this, but the label lost interest, the band lost interest, bye-bye. Now, it wasn't until 2020 that the Vapors returned with their third album. Now, Steve Smith is still there. Dave Fenton is there. Drummer Howard Smith is no longer in the band, but they've got a great drummer named Michael Bowes. And Edward Bazalgette still plays with them when he can, but he's actually a very famous director in the UK, produces a lot of BBC TV stuff. So he can't always get out there live to perform. So they replace him with Dave Fenton's son, Dan, who is a great guitar player, great musician, and also a great vocalist, as he displays on this album. Together, it's the third Vapors album, came out in 2020. This is the autographed version. There's the members there. So it has Dan Fenton, Steve Smith, Dave Fenton, Edward Bazalgette, and Michael Bowes. Now, this album is jam-packed full of great songs. There's not a stinker in the bunch. The CD actually has 12 tracks. The vinyl has 10. So I, obviously encourage you to buy the CD. It is such a great album. The album was produced by Steve Levine, and in a sense, it combines sort of the punchiness of the first album with the atmosphere of the second album, and then adds a whole new element. There's a lot more harmony vocals on this album. It's absolutely incredible. It's wonderful. Some people say it's right up there with the first two albums, and I'm going to say yes, it is. Sure, I've had 40 years to listen to those other two albums, but I can assure you that if I live another 40 years, this is going to sound just as good as it does today. So the Vapors together. So now we have 3 Vapors albums, To Love and To Cherish. Now these here both are very hard to get now on CD, magnets, and Nuclear Days with bonus tracks. But you can still find the vinyl out there. Maybe not new copies, but you're still going to be able to find them. But if you can find these, or if you find a Vapors best of that combines songs from both of these albums, I highly recommend that, because they are great. They are power pop, they are new wave, they are mod, they're everything all thrown together. Together is a great album. If you've sort of held off and go, oh yeah, it's just another reunion album. No, this isn't just another reunion album. This is just an absolute return to form that is on par with these two albums. I highly recommend it. And that is it for this episode of CD Junkie. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it inspires you to go listen to the Vapors and to go out and buy the new album Together, which is absolutely fantastic and great. And of course, keep your eye out for Nuclear Days and Magnets, because those are great too. Like I said, power pop, just full of melody. It's everything you want in guitar-fueled, hook-filled pop music. The Vapors. Anyway, that's it. I appreciate you hanging out and listening to me babble about the Vapors. Remember to like, comment, share, subscribe. Remember to ring that bell for notifications for future videos. That's it for me. My name is Steve SCHNEE, the CD Junkie.